Hi everyone, and welcome to Series 2 of the Confidence Conversations podcast. I'm Gail from Enrichment Coaching, and I'm a personal development and confidence coach. My vision is to live in a world where people feel confident to be their best authentic version of themselves every day. I really want to empower people to take action through exploring what I like to call their confidence DNA and how they can enrich it. So my style of coaching is really informal, it's conversational, and it will always be all about you. I'm not all about models and theory, although I do believe they have their time and place. I'm really actions focused, I'm direct, and there's no fluffy stuff involved. And I'm a big believer in pulling up your big pants and going and getting stuff done. Now, I love to make a difference to those beliefs that you have about what you think you can and cannot do. So if you've been thinking about how one-to-one coaching might work for you and you want to find out more, then get in touch through my website, which is enrichmentcoaching.co.uk, and you can find my links at the bottom of each show notes. So enough about me. I'm really excited to be back with Series 2 of the Confidence Conversations podcast with some incredible guests who are ready to talk honestly about them and their confidence. Now, for this series, rather than kind of general confidence conversations, we're going to be digging a bit deeper to understand more about the things that have an impact and the things that enrich your confidence. And remember, there's little to no editing, meaning the conversation you hear is really authentically confident. If you listen regularly, I'd love you to subscribe. And more than that, I'd love to hear what you think. So feel free to get in touch. So go on and listen to the latest episode. Hi everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Confidence Conversations podcast. And today's topic is conflict, and I'm delighted to welcome Emma Jenkins, who is a mediator, but is also a trained conflict coach. And for me, this is really exciting because Emma sent me over her bio, and at the bottom she said that essentially with her you can learn how to argue well. And I have just actually said to Emma, I'd love to expand that to how to argue well with confidence. So without me going on and on, Emma, thank you for joining us, and tell us a little bit about you and your business and what you do.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be on here. I think as we've talked about, conflict and confidence have a very interesting relationship. So it's great to be part of the conversation. So I'm a mediator. I specialize in workplace and employment mediation, and I got into that after I did my law degree, and then I worked at the employment tribunal. And I really found there was a lot of humanity and people issues that go on in employment conflict and workplace conflict. So I loved the idea of training as a mediator, and workplace mediation really has fit the bill for me. And I trained about 7 years ago. So I've been doing that ever since. And it's great because you get to go into all sorts of organizations and all sorts of situations and help people go from a place of feeling very distressed and out of control to feeling a little bit more empowered to deal with the situation, and hopefully a bit better about the other person as well. But I'm also a conflict coach, and I trained in doing that a few years ago when I just kept getting asked after a mediation, can we carry on doing some work on this? Because I really feel like I've learned a lot about myself and about how to manage conflict, but I want to keep doing it. So I trained as a conflict coach, and I use that within the mediation practice or completely separately as well. And I'm also a DISC practitioner, which is about profiling and communication styles. And I love that. And again, I use that as part of coaching if need be. And again, if it's appropriate in mediation too, particularly if it's a team mediation, because a lot of that is around different communication styles. And I'm also a director at Mediator Network. So we support new mediators and experienced mediators with their businesses, but also we get work in to support organisations and individuals to resolve situations too.
Great. And Emma, I think, and I just said this actually, we should have started recording earlier, but I just said to you, I think for me, conflict comes up so much in coaching where people, naturally people go, oh, I avoid conflict, or that person avoids conflict. They won't deal with it. And, or actually we have made the word conflict something that maybe it doesn't need to be. I think that's the thing. So for me, this is about understanding a bit more about what conflict, when you're facing conflict, how you can deal with it with confidence, I suppose. But I want to come back to the mediation piece, because I think I'd love to know how you'd explain mediation to someone who hasn't experienced it before, or maybe thinks it's a bit of a fluffy HR intervention. I think we've all been heard, oh, they need some mediation, but actually, what, explain it to us.
Well, first, if I start with what it's not, it's, that I have the phrase, particularly in workplace, where they say they just need to get in a room and have their heads bashed together. It's not that.
I love that.
So basically, it's around recognizing that so much of difficult situations between other people can escalate when you're not given the space and the support to deal with it properly. And so what mediation does is it takes it back to a more of an organic approach of having a conversation. And sometimes that conversation is tricky and delicate, and there's been stuff that needs to be addressed from the past, but also somehow moving forwards as well. And so that's what my role is there to do, is to help people have difficult conversations with each other and facilitate it in a way that makes them feel like they were heard, and stuff that they talk about from what happened previously has been acknowledged and listened to. And they're also able to vent to me, which I think is a vital part of mediation. And they're in a safe place to kind of discuss things and disagree still if need be, but hopefully also then get to a position where I can help them feel more able to discuss what happens next, and rather than feeling like they're stuck in this situation. But I'm not there to give advice. I don't champion one person over the other. I don't tell them what option to go through. So it's more about empowering them to find a solution.
And I love that description, and really interesting to hear you say, I'm not on one side or the other, because I wonder sometimes if there's a bit of a misconception that, if a mediator's been brought in, then they're going to be one-sided. And a lot like coaching as well, you're not there to advise, no. Are you? You're guiding the conversation, you're facilitating the discussion. So then what about conflict? How do you define conflict?
Well, in its most simplistic form, I'd say that conflict is difference. Difference in thought, difference in behavior, difference in communication, difference in understanding. And I think, which is why for me, conflict is not necessarily a negative word.
Yeah.
Because, as a society, what we are hopefully trying to move more towards is accepting of people's differences. And it's easy to say everyone is different, but when we're in a situation, an interaction with someone else, actually our natural position is to expect them to behave how we would, or how we want them to. Sometimes we wouldn't do that, but sometimes we have higher standards for other people than ourselves. But yeah, it's essentially differences.
I love that way of describing it, because I think often, and again in coaching sessions, when people have talked about conflict and how they describe it when they're they're maybe venting in that sense, quite often I will get them to try and have a bit more of a positive spin on it, a bit of a different slant on it. What would this look like if it was different for you? And actually I wonder whether the word difference, well, certainly for me, immediately that word difference has a completely different feel to it than the word conflict. It's just completely different, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And I think that's the thing, is because we've kind of positioned conflict as being this negative thing when people are not in a good place. But actually, for me, one of the reasons that I enjoy kind of getting involved in these situations is that I love the history of conflict in a positive sense, you know, civil rights movements that have happened over the years, all of these things where there were very different opinions, and people really truly believed their position was the correct one. But it's only by someone saying, no, this is a different alternative perspective on that, and eventually there being some way of trying to collaboratively find a way forward. It was only when that happens that changes happen. So for me, positive change doesn't often happen without some form of conflict, without some form of difference to make that change happen.
Yeah, so true. So true. So then talk to me about, first of all, what confidence means to you.
I think for me, if I think about inner confidence, it's that feeling of calm and being empowered.
Oh, I love those two words. Definitely. And the calm. I asked my one of my nieces is just got engaged, and we were having this conversation. She said, the only way here I'm going to be able to afford a wedding is if I rob a bank. Right, it's not going to happen, by the way, but it was amusing. And she said, oh, and I think you could help me. And I was like, out of all the people you could choose to rob a bank, you'd pick me. And she's like, yeah, because I think you'd be quite calm. And I don't know whether it's kind of a coach kind of, you know, that kind of thing. You'd be quite calm. And I was like, yeah, that's random. And no, I'm not up for that. But thanks for asking. But that word calm is just it. And also, I think as well, if you can bring calm to conflict, for me that is, again, starts to feel a bit better, doesn't it? You're bringing down the tone of it. And then you also said to me as well, when we were talking sort of right at the top, about how conflict and confidence for you have quite an interesting relationship. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I think it's because you know, I have different people coming into my mediation sessions, and for some people, they're very distressed by the fact that they're in this situation in the first place, because their natural tendency is to avoid uncomfortable situations. And that comes from this, you know, lots of different things potentially, but confidence has a lot to do with it, and a lack of confidence, because they're not sure how they're going to deal with the situation. Often it's because they've had a situation in the past that this, you know, either with this same person or someone who reminds them of that person, and they don't want to have that again. They're not sure what's going to happen, so it's that feeling of being out of control, not sure how to predict it. And so that lack of confidence can actually cause some quite difficult situations in relationships, because you end up staying silent, but the resentment doesn't go away by itself. There's still stuff happening. It's just quiet, silent conflict. And so it's that. And then also from the other perspective, there are people who come in with a kind of confidence which doesn't necessarily it doesn't necessarily relate to how well they're coming across. They may believe that they're communicating really effectively, that they've handled the situation well, that there's nothing that they did which has led to this situation or contributed to it. And so there's a kind of confidence which is probably overconfidence. And so for me, having that really realistic balance of confidence can really help in conflict, because from one side you're more empowered than maybe those people who would shy away from conflict, but also you're more self-aware than those people who may not really have a true understanding of how they're coming across.
Yeah, God, it's so interesting, isn't it? So how does your own confidence help you in these? Because I'm imagining you probably go into some quite tense, challenging situations. So how does your own confidence help you in that?
Well, I think as a general rule, a mediator needs to be able to take control of the room. because there may be some power dynamics going on in that situation, particularly for my niche, which is workplace, because there may be a manager in the room with their team member. So there's already a little bit of a power dynamic happening there that I have to be very conscious of. And because it's not about the organization getting the solution that they want and me trying to make sure that the employee kind of goes in line with that, then it's important that they know that I'm in charge and that there's no vested interest from me or the organization in a particular solution. And that if they don't play within my rules, then it will get picked up on.
Right.
And I think that's really important for both people to know, because they're more likely to remain calm. They are more likely to listen to me when I say, okay, let's not interrupt, or you will have your turn in a second, or, you know, let's not use that phrase. I don't think that's helpful right now, or let's take a break. You know, things like that, which are very important and come up quite a lot in certain situations. They have to be able to trust in my confidence. And yeah, I think that's probably the key one. But also, I think we've had this conversation before recently, where I mentioned that there have been some situations where, you know, being a woman and being a mediator has been brought up by organizations that may want to bring me in to sort a situation out, and the dynamics are all male, and they're not used to having a female be in charge, be the leader in the room. And so there's a question mark around, are you going to be able to handle them? They're concerned that they may not listen to me. And so I have to exude confidence with the organization as well. And thankfully, you know, I do have confidence in myself to be able to handle a room regardless of who's within that room.
Yeah. And that's really interesting, isn't it? That we're still talking about you being in a male environment and then thinking, oh, you're a woman, can you it's quite sad that we're actually having that conversation. But I think to hear you then say, you know, I've got the confidence in myself, my own belief that I can do this, immediately sets a bit of a bar, doesn't it, in terms of, I'm going into this. And can the words, can you handle it? I mean, my immediate reaction is, yeah, of course I can, even if inside you're not completely feeling that. You know, you're in a critic in yourself that is going, oh, can you do it? And of course you can. That's what you're gonna act as if you really can do. Yeah, I have no doubt that you can. But I can hear immediately in my head, you know, something kind of going, are you sure, Gail? And I'm like, yes, of course I'm sure. How do you manage your own confidence then in those situations?
I think having anchors can really help. So for me, some of those anchors, if I start to kind of experience a bit of imposter syndrome or self-doubt, I'd think through, what have I done already? And therefore what can I do now? Because I've already seen it and I've already felt it. And I've seen the response when I have been confident. So I also have those anchors of reminding myself, but also motivating me to keep moving forward as well, because it's important and because I've seen the outcome of being confident.
And I love this idea of anchors. You know, the things that you've done before. One of the things I would always say to my clients is, you know, when they say, oh, I don't think I can do this, or they have that self-doubt, is, you know, where's the evidence? First of all, where's the evidence that you can't, but also where's the evidence that you can? And often there isn't any there isn't evidence that they can't, but there is evidence if they can and what they've done. And I like this idea of being able to sort of do that in the moment. You know, it's like, right, let me just stop, take a breath and think about where I can do this to feel more, to get that empowered feeling back, I guess.
Yeah. And I think, you know, part of it stems back from as a child, you know, my parents, they kind of trained in different coaching techniques and counseling techniques at different points. And one of the things that they would do when we were maybe having a tough friendship situation at school is that they would kind of prep us and help us have things up our sleeve to, if we're feeling a bit shaky or overwhelmed, I've got a phrase that I can use or something that I can do next to give myself a pause. And so that has always stayed with me.
Oh, you can't just leave me hanging. What kind of things? I'm really interested. What kind of things are they?
Well, it would depend on the situation, but they'd have things, like just telling us you can walk away at any point. Like, they were very clear with us not lying or being deceitful. But also, if we ever weren't quite sure about how we were going to come across and we were really worried about it, but we wanted to do the right thing, they always would say, blame us, just blame us. And then it kind of took the peer pressure element that you have when you're that age of feeling like, well, I'm going to be judged for this. But actually, if it's my parents, then no one, loads of people relate to that. So they're kind of like, oh, parents. And so they just kind of gave us different tools to use like that. And I can't remember some of the phrases were often specific to the situation.
It's a great idea though, isn't it? Almost having like things that you can pull out of your back pocket to go, I can use that now. I can use that now.
Exactly.
To help me in this situation to feel more confident, or to kind of throw a bit of water on the fire of the conflict, or whatever's going on for me right now. I really love that idea, and I wonder, to people listening, whether they have that kind of thing. Do they have something that, so I think sometimes with some of my clients, I'm thinking about some of the people that I've worked with recently, we've had a few things where we've had to almost just say, right, just stop for a second, take a breath, and then kind of but you have to do it so quickly, you have to get used to doing it, don't you? For you to then become more confident, I suppose, as well. So Emma, tell me, if somebody wanted to be more confident when they were facing a conflict situation, if there was one piece of advice you could give them, what would that be?
Prepare.
Okay.
I'd say to prepare, because in a situation like that, all these chemicals are rushing around your brain and you're feeling the stress of it. Most people do not find conflict when someone is, it's not a kind of happy conflict. It's between two people and it's a relationship that's gone wrong. That kind of conflict is not comfortable and it's not nice. And, it affects people's physical disposition and their health. It can affect their mental health. It's a really significant thing that happens physically as well. And so I think reminding yourself that actually preparing doesn't mean that you don't know how to handle yourself. Preparing means that you know that your body is going to have a physical response to this situation. Your brain is having a response to this situation. But if you've prepared for it, then you're preparing your body for it as well. And you're not distracted by these other things going on. And so for me, preparation could look like taking notes, thinking through what could happen in this situation that I might want to say, that reminding yourself that silence is okay, reminding yourself that they might want to say something before they can listen to you, and thinking through when am I going to do this? Who's around? Is it private? Is there going to be something following on from that which makes it a rushed conversation that doesn't feel very constructive or productive? So planning things like that on your own. For me, obviously I'm a conflict coach, so this is the stuff that I do a lot of the time, is general coaching around people and communication and workplace situations. But specifically, I get called in to kind of help people have clarity beforehand, before they have a conversation, so they feel empowered to have it in a calm and confident way.
Yeah, great.
And so for me, preparation is key. So if it's not something that you feel like you're going to get enough from doing by yourself, then finding someone that you can talk to, whether that's a professional like yourself or me, whether that is a trusted person in your inner circle who can give you beneficial feedback, not just tell you, yes, that sounds great, and not actually believe it, not just be lazily unkind with how they give feedback. It's lazy. You don't have to be cruel to be kind. That's laziness. So if you've got someone in your circle as well, but preparation helps.
I think that point around a trusted person is really key, isn't it? And one of the things that a lot of the research says about confidence is about your environment and how that can positively and negatively impact your confidence. And I think around the preparation, that the environment is really important, isn't it? You know, like you've said, silence is okay. How uncomfortable, some people really struggle with silence, don't they? But the power of silence sometimes is really important. And this idea of kind of, you know, mentally and physically preparing yourself, again, you're thinking about the environment, you know, where you're going to be, but also your environment involves these people that you have around you. And these trusted people, and like you say, not just the people that are going to say what you want to hear, that they're able to give you probably a little bit of a different perspective before you go into something like that, can sometimes be useful because you're able to then reflect on that, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. And you don't want people around you who's going to put you off, or, you know, like, if they are not confident having difficult conversations, they are unlikely to be the right person.
Yeah.
Because they will probably project some of their discomfort onto you and try and, you know, pacify you rather than help empower you. But yes, I think having people around who can say, so you said that to them, maybe that came across this way to the other person instead of how you thought it came across. You know, if you've got people around doing that, then in the conversation with the actual person you've had a bit of a difference with, you're not going to suddenly be surprised with, oh yes, okay, maybe I did need to do something differently, maybe that's how I contributed to this situation.
Yeah, and
More
I
likely to go
think
in with the walls down a bit more.
definitely, and I think we've all had those conversations where you've walked away and you've gone, oh, actually, I've not thought about it like that before. We've all been there, haven't we? I've just not thought about it. One of the things that I learned when I was doing my NLP practitioners was, and I knew it before, but it kind of brought it all to life there, was around the perceptual positions, you know, where you look at, you're almost looking at it from a fly on the wall perspective.
Yes.
And I remember when I was doing my training, I'd looked at a situation where there had been a bit of a conflict. And as I looked at that from a completely objective point of view, I looked at that and thought, oh yeah, do you know what, Gail, actually, maybe if you'd have just changed that a little bit or changed that, you might have got a different outcome. I mean, it was too late to go back at that point, but that was a real learning curve for me, just to say, I'm just going to take all of the emotion out of it. It's not easy to do, is it? Take all of the emotion out of it and just look at it from, as though someone else looking in. How would that have sounded? How would that have felt?
Yeah, and I think those emotions that can come up when you're not looking at it objectively can get in the way. So feelings of shame or guilt or blame, you know, they don't help make a situation constructive. They don't help move forward. So I quite like the word contribution instead, because then it's a bit more objective, less emotional, but you're still able to take accountability for maybe how you contributed to the situation without feeling like you did something morally or ethically, you know, in quote, you know, wrong.
Yeah, and language is so important as well, isn't it? You know, we started off talking about, you know, the word conflict, but even that, the whole word contribution, you know, what did you contribute to that conversation or to that situation, feels really different than, you know, I don't know, what did you say, or, you know, what should you have said, or, you know, that kind of thing. What did you contribute to that?
And then, because you can flip that around, so then how can you contribute to making the situation better?
Yeah, totally. It just all feels much better, doesn't it? So my final question then, I think we could probably, I say this to all my guests, right? We could talk all day because the topics are so interesting. But in terms of people who say, oh, I just don't like conflict, I just avoid conflict at all costs, what advice would you give to that person?
I say that without realizing, you may be making a rod for your own back.
Tell me more.
Because depending on well, it doesn't really depend what relationship you're in, because if you're doing it in one relationship, it's likely that it's happening in others too. So in a workplace situation, if you're avoiding conflict, what that probably looks like, one of the following or more: not speaking up when people ask for opinions or ask for feedback. So your voice isn't being heard and they don't get to understand what you can contribute. It could be not saying no and having healthy boundaries, which will impact you directly in terms of how you can be productive in the workplace, but also how you're treated in the workplace. If you are avoiding conflict, then you may not be noticing what change could happen. Instead, you're feeling powerless. And all of those things are able to be remedied with facing it. And then that's just in a workplace situation. In a friendship or family situation, we're approaching Christmas. So one of the things I was talking to one of my coaching clients about recently was Christmas is a time when you're around family, and you've often been put into a role when you're in long-term relationships. And sometimes that role is fine, sometimes it's not fine. And so if you don't feel able to confront conflict, you're going to stay in that role that you don't like, and maybe having other impacts on you personally, but also on your relationships, if you don't face it. And in a long-term romantic relationship, I'd say if you are not able to face conflict, then it has a very significant impact on the longevity and health of your relationship. I said to my husband once, you have a choice. You can either discuss this situation with me now, or I'll grow to resent you. And I don't want that. Because for me, my marriage is more important than my discomfort in a conversation.
God, and so interesting, Emma.
So you can see I feel quite passionately about it, because it has such a wide-ranging impact. If the idea of conflict unsettles you to the point that you're avoiding things, which that small moment of discomfort, or a few moments, because especially if you're remedying something which has been in place for a long period of time, that those small moments could have such a powerful and long-lasting positive impact on your life and your relationships. My question is always, is it worth it?
Yeah, and I think this is about, well, I imagine a lot of your clients, when they've faced into that small moment of discomfort, once they've done it, probably feel like it wasn't as big as they thought it was going to be. And yes, it was worth it. It just felt really hard at the beginning, really hard.
Yeah. And, so many clients, before the mediation, I have a conversation with each person beforehand. And the number one thing that comes up is people not sleeping. People find it really difficult to sleep during conflict, because your brain's still working overtime. Your brain's not meant to be in conflict all the time. The negative kind of conflict. And so it affects people truly, physically. It affects, in a workplace situation, the conflict will still spill over to their home life and can affect romantic relationships. I've had so many people cry during a mediation because of the impact that the conflict that's been unresolved or not resolved enough has had on their life in a wide-ranging way. But then the feedback after the mediation, even if they're not best buddies with the other person afterwards, they are sleeping again. And they are feeling better about themselves and calmer and more able to deal with situations. And so for me, if you're able to, I think on one of my social media things, I talked about the children's book, We're Going on a Bear Hunt. And, there's the phrase, we're going on a bare hand, blah, 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 blah. We can't go over it. We can't go under it. We've got to go through it. And I think with conflict, that's the thing. You have to go through it. But if you are able to have the tools to do it in a positive and productive way, then you're going to come out the other side feeling a lot better.
Yeah, brilliant. God, Emma, there's loads of advice there. If our listeners want to find out more from you, where can they find you? We'll put all of this in the show notes, but where's best to find you or to connect with you so they can hear more about what you do and how you do it?
Well, I blog a lot. So I've got my website is mosaicmediation.co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn, and people can connect with me through my website, but I'm also, as I mentioned, a director with Mediator Network, and we do all sorts of things about resolving conflict, not just mediation. Mediation is one of the tools we use of a variety of different things that we can put in place. And so you can go to mediatornetwork.org alternatively as well, and you can get hold of me there. But yeah, I'm always available if someone wants to ring up about a situation, because it fascinates me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you can tell that. I mean, literally, we could talk for hours about this. But I think there's some really good tips in there for people if they are feeling really uncomfortable about conflict, and it's impacting their confidence. I think there's some things that they can do that are linked to their confidence. So, the preparation definitely for me is sometimes about knowledge, because then also you're taking control there of the situation. You're not worrying about the things you can't control. You're almost taking control of the things that you can have an impact on, aren't you, through the preparation?
Yeah.
And then the piece for me around, this small moment of discomfort, it is going to pay off. It's going to be powerful. Thank you, Emma. It's been a delight talking to you. And we'll pop everything in the show notes so that if people want to connect with you, they want to find out more, they can. But thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Gail.
So thanks for listening, and join us next time on the Confidence Conversations podcast.